Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Colonel Mike Power. I'm the commander of the 90th Maintenance Group at FE Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I would just like to say welcome to our Mission Capable Area session today on weapons and munitions, the best topic of the day. Stealth, speed, guidance, programmability, and payload are all characteristics of the overall weapons and munitions portfolio. As an Air Force, we need to ensure that our munitions are relevant and provide a volume of fire against adversaries who possess robust denial capabilities. Today, we'll hear from our experts on present and future capabilities in the weapons and munitions portfolio, and in particular, how these capabilities relate to ongoing world events and strategies. Joining me today to discuss all of these topics are Mr. John Snooze Martins, Director of International Programs at Global Weapons Manufacturer MBDA. Mr. Martins was a career naval aviator, Top Gun instructor, and program manager. Major General John Norman, United States Air Force retired, the Vice President of Customer Requirements and Capabilities, Raytheon Missiles and Defense. General Norman served for more than 32 years in the Air Force and retired as the Chief of Staff for United States Southern Command. And finally, we have Mr. Mark Altabelli, Director of Advanced Weapons and Missile Systems, Phantom Works, the Boeing Company. After nearly 30 years of service, he retired from the Air Force in 2013 as the Director of Checkmate on the Air Staff. For our audience today, you'll see a number that'll flash up here on the screen periodically, and if you'd like to submit a question, please text that number, and then we'll get your questions and we'll flow them into the Q&A portion. At this time, I'll now ask for each panelist to please provide opening remarks. So first up, Mr. Martins.
Okay, I'm John Martins, call sign Snooze. MBDA is a global weapons manufacturer with facilities in the UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, France, and of course the US. We have 40 weapons in the portfolio, but today we'll just talk about the air-launched ones applicable to the Indo-PACOM theater. So the Indo-PACOM theater is especially challenging for weapons because it comes with that anti-access maritime battlefield that not only requires standoff, but smart AI seekers that can detect, sort, target, and destroy targets on its own, those mobile targets. So good rule of thumb in the weapons world is that it takes about 10 years and $1 billion to develop a new weapon from scratch. So what I thought I'd do today is voice over a 3-minute video compilation of technology that's either fielded today or is funded to be fielded in the next 4 years. First thing we'll address is the range extension. Probably the easiest way to do that is to simply add a wing to an existing weapon. I'm out of our DC office, but our facility in Huntsville has produced 30,000 SDB-1 Diamondback wing kits. So James, this is a good time. Let's hit play. Next 15 seconds is all of the SDB-1. We actually did a demo with this Diamondback wing kit, mounted it on a 2,000-pound bomb, and demonstrated a 30-mile standoff. So you can imagine if you put a smart seeker, say a millimeter wave seeker on there, and now you have a relatively cheap anti-ship standoff weapon. So a representative seeker, smart seeker you might do is this is a dual mode brimstone. It looks a lot like a JAGM or a Hellfire, but it's stressed to be flown on fighters. You can see these are 2 combat shots of a relatively fast moving motorcycle. Very messy laser spot. Millimeter wave takes over in the end game and does all the hard work. I also did stuck a shot in a brimstone in the area attack mode. This is basically a self-contained kill chain where the weapon goes out, it detects the targets, it sorts it on its own, and then it prosecutes the intercept. You'll notice there's white shipping out there as well, and you can avoid those guys. So 410 fighters can carry 12 of these, so you can imagine a section of fighters can wreak havoc on 24 small boats or landing craft or a vehicle farm, if you will. 5 years ago, we started work to help out the Indo-PACOM theater to replace the solid on brimstone with an air breather. We call it Spear 3 or simply Spear. The extended time of flight required a data link and a GPS. So now think 100-mile standoff against multiple moving targets. Think mini cruise missile for all those tactical battlefield targets that don't quite warrant a Tomahawk or a JASM or a LRASM, if you will. It's funded to be integrated on the F-35. It's going on right now to come out in 2025. And so we'll finish up our air-breathing theme with coming up the ramjet-powered Meteor. Solid propulsion rocket motors have up to anywhere between 70 to 80% oxidizer. So if you can get rid of that and put 100% fuel, now you can greatly increase the range. In the case of Meteor, max range, 3 times a solid. In a chase down scenario, Meteor can go 5 times what a comparably sized solid rocket motor will do for you. Of course, this one's been around for a while. It's on the Rafale, Gripen, the Typhoon, and is being integrated on the F-35 to come out in 2025. So to summarize, there's some cool technology out there to extend ranges and some cool secret technology as well to go do some good work in the Indo-PACOM theater. Come see us at our booth, MBDA. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. General Norman?
Well, thank you very much. John Norman Storman, been with Raytheon for about 3 years, and I got to have a great opportunity to lead AQPs who did the fighter bomber and weapons before I went down to the retirement job at Southcom. So got to work the fighter bomber weapons programs for the Air Force, and you realize that our list of wants is much greater than our list of needs or what we can fund. And it really does help scope as you get over to industry where we need to invest in for the new technology versus what we can do with P-cube die. It's funny how often we forget that we can have this list of desires out of DoD, but ultimately mom and dad sit over on the Hill, and they're the ones that are going to sign the paycheck for buying all these munition systems and platforms and self-protection capabilities and communication capabilities. So for us to be effective, it's that partnership of industry with the Defense Department to go through those capability gaps that the threats have generated, identify where we can P-cube die our existing programs of record, because like we talked about, a new weapon system, it's in the billions and it's in the tens of years, not years, to develop, and that doesn't keep pace with where the threat's at. So as we're seeing these evolutionary changes in the threats, we can very clearly identify some areas that we can do technology insertions, take advantage of what we're doing with digital engineering, model-based system engineering, DevSecOps, composability using the WOSA-MOSA to field something very rapidly to counter the capability gaps that the threats have achieved. So we're doing that with our program, certainly with the existing fielding weapon system. So take any of the weapons that our companies produce, and it's pretty easy for folks to sit there and just pejoratively say, I don't want to buy old legacy. Well, is a 1958 Corvette the same as a 2021 Corvette? No, not at all. For us, take an AMRAAM for example, same PE number, fundamentally different weapon system. For an SDB-1 that Boeing makes, a fundamentally different weapon system from the very Block 0 that came out to where they're at now. And it has the ability to address the gaps that the threats make with a very low investment. When we get to the point where we see attributes out of these threat evolutions that become more revolutionary, so their advancement in the hypersonics or in DE-type weapons, that's where it may require the development of a new capability. And then that's where it's just absolutely vital that industry partners very closely with the services to help define what those key system attributes are. What is it specifically that the government has got to have in this new weapon system or this new platform to address this threat capability gap? And I'd say almost as importantly, what's that budget that we can design to? Because all of our companies have phenomenal engineers that make your brain hurt when you sit there and talk with them, because they think on a different level. But left to their own devices, they will engineer and engineer and engineer until the cows come home, and it's going to deliver an unbelievable capability, probably 5 to 10 years too late at a cost that's 5 to 10 times too much. So if we can scope the problem, it's like doing your thesis statement. Here's the attributes you have to hit. Here's the answers that you need to your hypothesis. And here's how long you have to do it in. And here's all the money that you have. If we can frame that then industry can come back with the absolute best solutions that we can offer within the time frame of the doable. So that's kind of my day at summer camp. And then I guess the final thing that I learned is that in all this, communication is absolutely essential. Within industry, we partner all the time, and between us and the government. And I'll use my use case example. I went to the barber yesterday. Like I'm going to a big Air Force event. I want it tightened up on the sides and just make it a little shorter on top. And as the clipper went across the top, I failed to communicate effectively. So learn from my mistake. Over to Alto, please.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Altobelli?
Well, it's always great to go last because then you can hear what everyone says and then you can throw out your script and just respond. So first, I appreciate the advertisement from MBDA about how great the SDB-1 is. It truly is combat effective in providing great capabilities to the warfighters today and into the future. And like Storman said, you know, with the chart that was there before about what the threats, what's going on with the threat, it is true. It's a different environment, and the keys of those attributes, the ones that are important in understanding what those key attributes are really there. So it's good to be last in this case here. One of the things I like about AFA, it feels like I'm coming home. So first of all, I retired a long time ago, and I haven't seen Storman in a long time, and we go way back. And again, I get a chance to see all my friends and colleagues from the Air Force. You know, we're in industry, but for me, I bleed blue. I'm doing everything that I'm doing in my part to help the Air Force and help the Joint Forces, for that matter, to have weapons necessary. Because without weapons, we're just an airline. We got to do effects, so we need weapons, and that's what we bring is the weapons that make those effects. Whether they start from below the sea, or they go from an ICBM, or if they're air launched, we need weapons, right? So it's really great to be here. You know, Boeing has been producing precision weapons for a long time, and we are able to produce them at scale and provide them, you know, to the Air Force, our allies, and our joint services, so that they can be combat ready today and into the future. But really, the environment is changing drastically. We mentioned Indo-PACOM, but there's another problem on the other side of the world that has its own unique capability, unique challenges as well. And again, we're going to hear a lot over the next couple of days about JADC2. Right, that joint all-domain command and control. It's important that we have that, right? But at the end of the day, we have to plug into our Army brothers and our Navy partners in the Marine Corps. And when we talk to them and our allies, it's how do we connect in, and they have to have weapons that will do things for them. And that's why some of the things that we're developing, like you talked about surface launch. You say, well, why am I to talk surface launch when I'm amongst airmen? Well, if the airmen have the eyes and the ears and they're flying their F-35s and they're seeing everything, identifying targets, reach into that deep magazine that's on the ground and then lay waste to the adversary. So that's the art of the possible. You go to the next slide, please. You know, Boeing, for the first 100 years, we started our second 100 years a couple years ago, and for the first 100 years, Boeing was really all about the things that we made, the airplanes, the ICBMs, the weapons, and things that we made. Right, but going forward the next 100 years, it's really what we're doing. It's about how we do that. The changes we're making, like John said, our engineers are incredible. All of us are embracing the digital engineering, but we recognize how important that is. And if you look at the ET-7, the first platform to get that designation from the Air Force about being digitally designed from the beginning with that digital twin that gives us all sorts of opportunities. And these are the things, the numbers that we've seen that help the companies save money and saving time. And what that does is allow us to not be at $1 billion for a product and not to go have a weapon based on attributes made 5 years ago that are now not going to be really fielded until 5 years from now. So by the time that the weapon is developed, it's 10 years late to need. A great weapon, but still 10 years late to need. So it's important that we go at that speed. Chief Brown made the point. Right? We need to accelerate change or lose. And industry can do that for you, with you, as we all embrace the open architecture to digital design that the future is in for us. So with that, back to you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen. They inform me that for the submitting of the I do have an opening question here in a second, but for the submitting of the questions, if you could please write this down or type this somewhere, it's going to be www.slido.com. And then the number you send the message to is 221530. So But to start off the conversation, and for all of you on the panel, an opening question that's concurrent with our current events right now. So with the withdrawal from Afghanistan complete and the transition away from that largely anti-insurgency mission, how does that influence a change in munitions requirements from the view of industry in both capability and positioning? So if you want to start, Mr. Martins.
Yeah, I see a huge change when you introduce a near-peer competitor. You no longer have that sanctuary that you maybe have on some third world battlefield. Specifically, you introduce the air-to-air threat as well as a potential threat that can protect themselves. So I think what we're going to see is a degree of standoff becoming a requirement on the next battlefield.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I'd frame it consistent with that, but maybe a little bit different. So if you look over the past 20 years of engagement, the bias has been towards that direct attack type of effector, a little bit of standoff at the beginning of OIF for sure. I think the balance is going to swing back. That pendulum's going to go back the other direction towards those attributes of range and speed that'll address that A2AD environment. I would contend, however, that again, not every warfight requires that $2.5 million exquisite solution. It's the hammer that sees every problem as a nail. There'll be a range of those, and so I think that's going to be the big challenge for the services as they look across the range of military operations, as they're addressing the national defense strategy. What is that right weapons mix of both direct attack and the standoff that we need? Not every weapon needs to be hypersonic, 1,000-mile, but we certainly do need that within our arsenal.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, part of it is how do we get that right balance? Because we all know in this room that many times weapons are the bill payers. John made a comment before about all the great ideas. We have many great ideas than we have the resources to get after. So having that right balance, but the things needed for this contested and peer fight, range, speed, collaboration, those are attributes that are going to be in these weapons going into the future. But all of those don't need to rest on the exquisite, and that the technology that's out there can be also dialed down to stuff that you can afford, because what you don't want to have to use is that nail and hammer when it's not required. I may need standoff, but I don't want to really use my exquisite weapon in an area where I need a little bit of standoff, and that way I can use it somewhere else. So trying to develop those P-cubed-I, those updates to the existing weapons that are available by adding tail kits, by adding engines, by adding a low-cost seeker, then you can hold a broad range of targets at risk so that you have the rest. The other part is scale. And people think scale many times is about how do I produce a lot. That is one. But the JFAC, he's producing sorties, he's trying to produce effects on the battle space, which means I need to get my weapons, these high-speed, long-range weapons, to fit on my 4th and 5th gen platforms. And then, additionally, they need to be able to be large numbers on the bombers. Okay, when you walk out the door and your bomber has 4, maybe 8 hits, that's nice. And I think it's great, and we need that. But what does it mean when he walks out the door with 20 or 30? And what does it mean when a fighter walks out the door, an F-15E or an F-15X, carrying 5 or 7 standoff weapons? That allows the JFAC to have, on the first day, a throughput that he can then change the pace of the battle. So we need to have that scale, that mass needs to be available on day one, not limited to later on.
Great, thank you very much. So the first question coming in here, and this is directed at General Norman for Raytheon. Sir, do you see a scenario in which the advancement of weapons technology outpaces the fiscal constraints to employ them effectively? Said another way, what is the risk of the next generation of weapons becoming constrained by fiscal policy to the point that we, the U.S. Air Force, are not able to field position new weapons in suitable quantities to be effective in multiple theaters?
Well, I think you heard Secretary Kendall talk about this morning. So we don't have the luxury of being in this experimentation prototype do loop. So it's time to slap the table and pick that direction that we want to go for that technical solution. Narrow the field a little bit. And so let's pick that that capability that we want, get it out to industry, come back with your best ideas, and move forward on it. We've seen the advantage of the 804s and the OTAs for expediting the way we get after developing the new weapon systems. I would suggest, as I talked about earlier, put that cost target on there early, and that will certainly help the services with selling it over to the Hill, and it certainly helps us within industry to designing towards that specification point. And then I think the other area where we're going to see great savings is as we progress down this path of DevSecOps, of digital engineering, of model-based system engineering, it's getting our testers onto the same point with this. So it's the DOT&E, so AFA, Air Force T&E, the service TE organizations. We have to get to the point where we say this many tests are good enough to validate the model, so we can do that portion virtually, and now we can focus the live fly on perhaps a terminal. I'll give a use case example. So a lot of us are working on long-range hypersonics. It costs a lot of money to test one of those, and there are very limited locations that you can test those. And the availability is incredibly limited. So let's use those infrequent test opportunities to test that launch through the mid-course, validate our models, and if I'm an adversary, I'm looking forward to the notifications to mariners and aircraft of when you're doing that test, so I can park AGI in every mode of my spacecraft right there to watch you test that, so I can glean as much MASN information as possible. So let's do that as few as time as possible. Let's test that in a virtual environment in the future going forward once we validate the models. And let's focus on the terminal to hit what Alto and John have talked about, where we're going to do that collaborative weapons, where we're going to do the active target recognition, where we're going to do the keep out testing, and we're going to validate here's the level of target discrimination I'm able to get with this new weapon system, so that I can get an ROE in the future to allow me to employ it, and I can validate the kill chain, both virtually and in terminal, that we're looking at with JADC2. So I think there are ways to get after this, but it's time to stop sitting back observing, and it's time to probably throw the rock and make some decisions on what those next generation, those revolutionary capabilities we need are.
Roger that. Thank you, sir. The next question is directed at Mr. Altobelli for Boeing specifically, and I know you actually hit on this a little bit in your opening remarks, sir, but if you want to further elaborate. With the Chief of Staff of the Air Force's guidance to accelerate, change, or lose, how has Boeing updated its processes to provide increased speed in developing a new weapon? And actually, I think it applies to probably all of us. I'll start with you, Mr. Altobelli, though, providing increased speed in developing a new weapon.
Sure, thanks. I'm going to piggyback on what John just said here a little while ago about the testing, right? So how do you accelerate change or accelerate or lose, right? Well, one way, we have to change the way we do things. At Eglin, their Agile office is changing. They are changing the way they do business, and both of our companies just recently finished our totally digital SRR for our hypersonic weapon. Both companies did that. In fact, Lockheed did as well, so congratulations to Lockheed as well. So the companies are changing, and we're there on point with Eglin as they're on this journey to this digital environment. The other part John brought up, which I think is really important, is we have to change the way we test, right? The way that we do all the interfaces. Right? So UAI is a great example. Here's a way that, at the end of the day, it's got to go on an airplane. At the end of the day, it's got to have an OFP, and that takes probably more time than it does on the weapon side. So if we can continue to adequately fund with reasonable and consistent funding the UAI effort, it's a consortium. It's not just Boeing. It's all of us, such that is out there, and it's not just for U.S. It's for NATO as well, that common across, and that will allow us to go faster. And finally, the bit about the virtual testing and all. So the Boeing's Virtual Warfare Center, that provides a seabed to space opportunity, because at the same time that the testers are seeing, does the weapon fall off the airplane? Does the weapon then light? Does the weapon then go? That's great. But we also need on day one what are the TTPs for this? How does this come together? Does that kill chain close? And you need to be able to have confidence in the warfighters that kill chain is going to close, and that's what the Virtual Warfare Center allows you to do. We just finished the space flag, where they're fighting in space, and then bringing that up to guarantee that message gets to the proper spot at the proper time to close that long-range kill chain. We've got to make that a reality and make sure our warfighters have confidence in it so they're not afraid to use it on day one.
I'd like to add to that. So there are some other areas where we can generate significant efficiencies. So when you develop any weapon system, there are specific components that are big cost drivers. It could be out propulsion. Hey, here's a shocker. We have two propulsion companies in the United States, Aerojet and NGI with old ATK. We also rely on NAMO, a foreign partner, to provide capability. We have to. That propulsion piece could be something that the government delivers that is standardized, that now is put out to industry. Here's a swap that you have to work with, a length, weight, the diameter of the rocket motor. Build us your best cache, your best guidance kit, your best fuse and warhead, and let's integrate this into that future weapon. And that's kind of the path that Heath is going down. Some other elements that you look at, the data links, always the biggest cost driver on any weapon, especially the future weapon. So the sooner we can standardize that, the earlier the government can start realizing some EOQ savings, economic order quantity savings on these, because it costs a lot to build each one of those. It costs a lot to integrate each one of those. And as we work towards that joint JADC2 future, the quicker we can get to a common architecture and a common radio and format, the more capable we're going to make these weapons. And then two other ones, the flight termination system, you go, yeah, that's just for test. Maybe. I don't pretend to be a lawyer. I've stayed at Holiday Inn Express, but it's not unreasonable to expect a lawyer to require some way to terminate a very long-range, high-speed weapon in the future to satisfy an ROE requirement. But we will certainly need it for test. And if you've seen one FTS, you've seen one FTS, and it's always a huge driver that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And then the final one would be like a secure processor. And a lot of folks wonder, why would the government want to invest in that? Look at the news. We just pulled out of Afghanistan. We left a lot of equipment over there that I bet has found its way to China and Russia already, or pick your adversary as being reverse engineered. So wouldn't it be great to have a secure processor that would help protect that key technology? If you make each defense industry partner go out and develop their own secure processor, you have 50 one-off solutions that now have to be tested against a very agile threat in near real time, and it takes us up to 6 years and about $500 million to develop it, and it's a huge cost driver. Or you could come up with a couple that are the government standard, get EOQ savings, reach out to industry, the commercial industry, because they're better equipped to do this, develop us a new secure chip, new hardware. Let's get on your 18-month cycle and make it WOSA-MOSA compliant and give it to industry, and we'll integrate it, make it scalable, and now we can keep up better, I think, with the threat.
Yeah, and just a quick plug, a way to accelerate technology and cut costs might be to involve our allies a tad bit more. There's areas where technologically they're equal to, or in some cases even a tad bit better. And oh, by the way, they paid the bill already. So why not leverage that and our allies and our partnerships to accelerate our capabilities here?
All right, thank you, sir. And so now to go kind of to the opposite of allies, as we focus on near-peer adversary engagement, this is for all of you, do you see a distinct difference in the weaponeering requirements of a conflict with China versus a conflict with Russia? Said another way, do you see a difference just in the requirements that are associated for a fight against Russia as opposed to a fight against China, and how does that reflect in industry and what's being worked right now? You want to start?
Sure. I think we're going to find China might be better resourced than Russia, and also introduce a different type of maritime battlefield that might prove a tad bit more challenging in terms of numbers of targets, scenarios, as well as, like I said, resources.
Yeah, China offers a significant challenge, a unique challenge. The Russian threat, we have well-established alliances which give us basing and partner action. More challenging, I think, in the Indo-Pacific because As China engages in that area, they tend to do everything bilaterally, and they tend to divide and conquer. And you look at their One Belt, One Road initiative and the way that they roll out the economic investment, the technology investment. They own the internet in all these ASEAN countries. And then the financial, and then all of a sudden they have so much national interest in an area that we just have to put some military capability nearby to protect our national interests. And all of a sudden they've gone out to the first island chain, second island chain, marching on their way to the third with One Belt, One Road going through the Americas, and then certainly over in through Africa and the MENA region. So they are a proliferating, challenging threat for sure. The other issue that causes, I think, our defense planners is, how do we deal with that longer range? I think it's a more prevalent attribute for our effectors and our sensors and our ability to do that command and control in a very hostile and often denied environment faced against that China threat, because we don't have assured basing. And so the work that General Guyot, and then certainly we're seeing now General Wilsbach and General Harigian and USAFE with agile combat employment, that's something that all of us in industry have got to stay very, very closely tied to, and it needs to be pressed upon us and worked with us so that we invest our very limited IRAD dollars into those near-term capabilities that are going to give the biggest capability back to the Air Force that we can for that long range.
So I think we covered China really, really well, and that is a challenge there, right? That China, the range, the sheer tyranny of range. But we have to look at it again from a joint fight, right? With going on with Russia. I alluded to it in the beginning, right? We don't have to win every war just with the Air Force. And where certain theaters and regions, air and naval power become preeminent, and maybe that's the wrong word, along with space power, but that's what the force that's going to be there. But there's other areas where our joint partners can provide one heck of a punch. Again, imagine, if you will, you're a Norwegian unit. You're there. You're right on the border. You don't have to travel, and you have a ground launch SDB. And in short order, you can flood the zone with 100 SDBs that all can collaborate, that all have the things that we've talked about here, that can adjust it. Now the adversary is reacting to us because we're inside his IADs, and he has to deal with that. Because we all know when we're really looking at the IADs, they'd like to shoot from the far to near. All of a sudden, bam, you pop up, it changes it. Likewise, imagine you're now a field artillery unit. There's a lot of cannons out there, a lot of 155 cannons. And if you can produce a round that goes north of 100 kilometers, and you say, well, what's 100 kilometers? Well, in the Pacific, you get wet. But in Europe, 100 kilometers, you flew over Kaliningrad. There's a lot of places, and again, our allies and partners are there. So by leveraging our allied and partners, it'll help out. With JADC2, you say, now we're with the Air Force, right? When you go out there, how do we take the centers that we have, from our attritable platforms to our stand-in platforms to our standoff platforms to our space to the whole lot? How do I tie that and then get the information to the right locations? There's no reason why that ground unit can't be supporting to the supported element, and the supported element being a flight of 4 F-35s or an F-15 with an ATS partner. So those are things that are there, and then that's what's different, is that proximity. It doesn't make it go away. And now if we're trying to stretch our resources, then you could leverage that part of the joint fight in that region and the other part of the joint fight in the other region to stretch what we have.
Great, thank you, sir. There's a few questions coming in all along a similar topic here, talking about supply chain. So all these capabilities are amazing. Industry is obviously on the leading edge of, and we've seen the pictures today and the videos and everything. I guess a broader question, and we only have 5 minutes left, so if we could just go down the row and talk about this question, but also maybe give some closing remarks as you do. What can we as an Air Force do better to make sure that industry is poised to supply these weapons to us when we need them and in the right quantities and those kind of things? If you want to start, Mr. Martins.
Yeah, I think that's at the heart of that is a resource question, right? You just have to appropriately resource priorities, and I think you'll see industry react to where the money's flowing. And thank you so much for letting me participate today.
Thank you, sir.
I think what would help, I think we have very good access across industry, certainly within the Pentagon. At at some of the MAGCOMs. I think opening up more to engagement with industry, to my JAG brethren out there, don't be so reluctant for industry to come in and talk with warfighters. There's a finite bucket of IRAD money, and the Air Force needs industry to spend their IRAD money because there is not enough money in the CRAD bucket to pay for all the new development that's needed, technology development. The Air Force is better served if industry talks with warfighters, with the component commanders that are at the front line working with our allies to make sure that we understand what your priorities are, where you see the biggest gaps, so we have more productive engagements with the acquisition side and with the Air Force requirements side, both at the lead MAGCOMs and at the headquarters Air Force. And that's going to get you a capability you want a lot faster. I appreciate working with industry. All of us make great products. We should not be coming in with a ShamWow pitch. Don't need it. What you do need is, here's what the art of possible is. Here's the advanced technologies that we've been working on, that we've been developing, that have a TRL level that can get you there within a palm cycle or within the FIDEP. Here's the stuff that are really cool science projects that are probably better reserved for the SCO, the DARPA, or the service research labs. But we have to have that open dialogue for that to take place.
That's a great point. One of the things we look at, I joined Boeing, went right into Phantom Works and started working in the Virtual Warfare Center. And from the very beginning, I was told is, hey, what we do in the Virtual Warfare Center, it's engaging. It's engaging to understand. I mean, that was the part, right? We want to engage with all the warfighters with acquisition to understand their problems, because we have to place bets. We have to put our IRAD where it counts the most. And that's why we'll do that analysis using the Virtual Warfare Center to understand, of all of these things, these great ideas that all of our companies have, which one moves the needle the most? And that one then we look at is, now that we know it's a needle mover, then we ask ourselves, can we do something about it with our company? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes, and it's like, okay, let's double down. Let's go after that. And with digital engineering, that we can make this cycle go faster. The open architecture allows the things to go on faster. The composable weapons, as you would say, or if you will, the modular weapons that are out there, we can do those things and deliver capability faster than it had been in the past. Just, again, look at the T7. Clean sheet to flying, fairly quick. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, hey, on the digital engineering piece, so this is something every one of you out in the audience ought to be focusing on. This isn't just an acquisition buzzword. You want the output of these models. You want these digital twins because you want to run them through your campaign analysis. And that allows you to do all the capability trades, add in some more of these X weapons or these X platforms, pull them out, give them a different attribute. You can do that with the digital twin, and you've got to demand that from the acquisition community so that you can make informed requirement decisions in the future. I can't emphasize how important that is for you. And it probably goes more to, here's why you ought to be working with the industry as much as possible. We'll make the information available. It's going to be government-owned information, so take advantage of that.
Roger that. Thank you so much. And a special thank you to our distinguished panelists today for this very informative conversation. If we could give them a round of applause, please. So we will now break for coffee and dessert in the exhibit hall. The next set of sessions will begin at 3:40, and if I could make a plug, here at 3:45, my colleague, Colonel Trish Chank, will be in